And then I made the transition, and all of a sudden it became truth. So the thing is that nutrition is very emotional, very charged subject, right? And that's okay. You're allowed to be emotional about what you eat, because a lot of what we've eaten over the course of time is like traditions and like things that make you feel good. But if you're really in this because you want to significantly improve your health, then it's important to also try and recognize that when your emotions bubble up, talk to your emotions and recognize that that's emotional, but also try and make dietary change as data driven as possible. And when you can do that, then the numbers don't lie, and the numbers will move you in the direction that you want to go.
Great. All right. So next question is coming from Stephen V. Please go ahead and ask your question, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Cyrus. I got a BMI of 22. My fasting glucose is 90. My triglycerides are 100. And my fasting insulin is 9. How big of a deal is the 9?
How big of a deal is the 9? That's a good question. I would say it's not that big of a deal. Read me the numbers one more
time. 90 on the fasting glucose, BMI 22, triglycerides 100.
Triglycerides 100. Okay. Do you have any previous measurements prior to that?
That's the first insulin measurement I ever took. Glucose has been in the 80s, 85 to 90. Triglycerides are 100 to 150. And BMI has been 22 for quite a while, 22, 23, like that.
Okay. And how do you eat?
And I'm whole foods plant-based. I use walnuts. I'll use flax seeds. A little bit of oil creeps in, if I buy some food, but it's pretty clean. Oatmeal, beans, sweet potatoes, salads, pretty clean. Not pristine, but pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a calculation called the HOMA-IR calculation, which is basically a mathematical formula that you can put your fasting glucose and your fasting insulin into, and then it'll spit back a number at you. And effectively, you want the HOMA-IR number to be low, and the lower the number, the less insulin resistance there is in the fasting state. So I don't have the actual equation in front of me here at this very moment, but I would recommend putting all of your values into that calculator and seeing what the number, what it spits back at you. Effectively, with a fasting insulin of 9, that means that you're basically in a hyperinsulinemic state in the fasted state. And the reason that that's likely happening is because there's a decent amount of insulin resistance inside of your liver and muscle that is still hopefully in the process of being cleared. And so your pancreas is basically having to work a little bit harder than it normally should in order to manufacture excess insulin to try and get glucose into your liver and muscle, right? So I would say on a scale of like 1 to 10, how big of a deal is it? I'd put it at like a 5 or a 6, to be perfectly honest. It's not alarming. The fact that your glucose is in the normal range is good. But we don't want your glucose to be in a normal range when you're forcing your pancreas to have to work, in overdrive for long periods of time.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you. And next question is coming from Laura M. Laura. Oh, close to that. Go ahead, Laura. Hold on. There we go.
Hello.
Hello, Laura.
Hi. I'm from Arizona. Thank you, Cyrus, for an awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, I'm a raw, low-fat, thin vegan for a number of years now, and my fasting, and I take my blood sugar reading in the morning, and every day it's like 110, 118, and I stop eating by 6 p.m. and then I take it like at 7:30 a.m. And I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong.
Okay. Do you exercise?
Oh, go ahead.
Are you exercising on a daily basis?
Well, yeah, I was listening to that previous caller, and I clean areas for a living, and so it's fast, and I do it all quickly, but it's like short, fast bursts. where my heart rate goes up, but I'm not doing sustained 30 minutes 3 times a week like you were saying.
Okay, that's my recommendation. So, I focus a lot of my education on teaching people what foods to eat in order to reverse insulin resistance. But the truth is that exercise is a very, very, very powerful tool. And I think a lot of people focus a lot on diet, which is great, but they neglect just how much power cardiovascular exercise has on lowering blood glucose. So what my recommendation to you, or to anybody else who's listening to this, who's in a similar position where your glucose is a little bit higher, even though you're taking all the right dietary steps, is good work on the diet, but we now have to get to a point where you are exercising more rigorously. Okay. And again, cardiovascular exercise in particular has a very, very powerful glucose lowering effect. And if you can get to a point where you're exercising, like I said, 3 times a week, doing, primarily cardiovascular exercise where you're in the zone 3, 60-70% of your target heart rate, you will see the effect, and you will see the effect very quickly. And it'll definitely lower your fasting glucose. And it could be literally just that simple.
Okay, I'll see if I can do that. But one problem is I don't really have a lot of extra energy because I'm doing the house cleaning, so many days a week, and I feel like I need to just rest, and so I don't feel like I have excess energy to really do aerobics.
Okay, let me challenge you with that. When you perform exercise the way that I'm suggesting, your overall energy level will actually go up. It's counterintuitive. People who exercise frequently often have a lot more energy for the rest of the day. And I know it sounds backwards, but if you could think about it from that perspective, you're not using up the remainder of the energy that you have for the day to exercise. You are using exercise to increase the amount of exercise, the amount of energy that you have for everything else. Think about it from that perspective.
Right. So we're going to go to the next caller, or the next person. It'll be Willa D. And we just have about 3 or so more minutes left. So we're going to be ending this at 6:50 Eastern time for everybody, just so you guys know. So Willa, go ahead and ask your question. Willa D. All right, going to Joe W. Joe, and ask your question.
Thanks. Great job, Cyrus. I heard Doug Graham talk years ago. You're a great student. So
Thank you.
question, cooked versus raw, especially tomatoes, beans. People still debate cooked versus raw.
Yeah. So probably can't eat beans in the raw state. Wouldn't recommend it. I used to be a raw foodist for 14 years. Huge supporter of raw food eating. I switched over to eating more cooked foods because I had a call with Dr. Furman, and I actually spoke with him at length about the benefits of eating, more cooked foods. And I found out that there's actually some nutrients that I could be missing. And also, I wasn't able to eat any legumes, which have a very serious protective effect on not only, improving glucose metabolism, but also on, longevity in the long term. So I switched over to eating raw plus cooked food, and I've become a believer in, the power of having cooked vegetables in your diet as well. So it's totally up to you. It's a personal choice, but I feel like this is one of those things, like we were talking about earlier. It's one of those things that we could debate this ad nauseum for years.
So
right?
which cooked have you put back in?
So I put back in, like steamed vegetables, whether they're non-starchy vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, things like that. Then I also put back in all legumes, beans, peas, and lentils. And then I also put back in potatoes.
Okay, great. Great to hear.
Yeah, so go for it. I mean, yeah, I think that this debate is something that may never be solved, but do what feels right for you.
And to that point, well, first of all, what are your thoughts on sprouted beans, which Brian Clemente is a component of?
Yeah, huge fan. Doug Evans is a huge fan of that too. Sprouted anything is a far superior form of nutrition. By all means, if you can sprout and you can get it in sprouted state, by all means do it.
So we just have a couple of minutes left. So on this debate of the minutia, do you find that people there's a danger of all these little tiny differences that people get lost in when they're trying to navigate how to be healthy, when the consensus is really what we should be focusing on, like a whole food plant-based diet, whether it is 100% raw or 80%, 80% raw, or, a mix of the two, or, whether or not you're getting this exact nutrient or you should add that exact thing in what are your thoughts on that and it muddling up the overall message for health?
100%. I get very frustrated with the sort of arguing over minutia because it just detracts from the overall picture, right? It's like we're missing the forest for the trees, right? What we're trying to do is move in the direction of eating a plant strong diet, right? And no two health experts will ever fully agree with one another because both health experts have a different educational background, they have different personal experience, and they're different humans, right? So, someone like, what's a perfect example? Dr. Will Bolsowitz, him and I are fantastic friends. We call each other all the time. We're good buddies with each other. And yet, despite that, sometimes he'll have one view of sourdough bread that might be slightly different than my view on sourdough bread. But that doesn't mean that he's a bad person. I don't espouse his philosophy. It just means that we have different experiences and different knowledge bases, right? Same thing. Dr. Furman might say one thing. I might say something different. Gabriel Cousins might say one thing. And, Robbie might say something different. So the fact of the matter is, like, what we're trying to do as a community is basically move towards a plant stronger diet. So let's all do that. And then all the tiny little minutia about what about vitamin K2 here, and what about sprouts here, and what about this? Let's tackle those on an individual basis, but we can't really let that get in the way of moving in this direction and really turning this into a sustainable lifestyle. That is the most important thing that you can do. And that's the way that we should all think.
All right. Well, I think that's a great way to end. Just one quick micro question. Someone's asking for the food log that you recommended.
Oh yeah, it's called Chronometer. Chronometer.
All right. And well, so I want to thank you. You're our last speaker, so we'll stay on after Cyrus goes. But so I want to thank you again. That was a really great and in-depth and easy to understand explanation of how we end up with diabetes. So I definitely took a lot of notes on that. So thank you. And if we can unmute the audience so they can share their appreciation with Cyrus as well.
The summer girls.
Great
presentation.
Cyrus.
Good heart.
Thank you, guys.
Tesla.